Great. Wonderful to see you guys all here. So our next speakers are from 80,000 Hours, Habiba Islam and Alex Lawsen. So Habiba previously served as the Senior Administrator for the Future of Humanities Institute and the Global Priorities Institute at Oxford. Before that, she qualified as a barrister and worked in management consulting at PwC, specialising in operations for public and third sector clients. Alex joined 80,000 Hours in September of last year, having previously worked as a teacher at a specialist sixth form college in London. So he spent a lot of time forecasting during the pandemic, including running some workshops and volunteering as a moderator on the forecasting platform Metaculus. He recently appeared on the 80K After Hours podcast, where he spoke to his colleague Kieran about advice he'd given students during his time in education. So I think you guys are probably all super familiar with the swap card app by now, so please post questions in there if you've got them, but we'll also be kind of going around with the mic, and I've got some questions too, trying to make this session as useful as it is for you guys. So, one note is that if you have like a burning question and it gets answered and you really want to go and do one-on-ones, like definitely do that. So this time is yours to make the most of. So yeah, please join me in giving a warm welcome to Habiba and Alex. So I think to kick things off, it might be great to just hear a bit about what you guys do. Like, what does a day in the life of Habiba and Alex look like at 80K?
Mm-hmm. Cool. So primarily we do one-on-one careers advising, and if we're doing a day where we're doing a bunch of calls, I think that often looks like doing a bunch of prep for the people that we're about to talk to just like read up on the things that they wrote and look at their LinkedIn and like plan the kinds of things that we want to talk about on a call, and then doing the call, and then afterwards having some follow-up that we would do. So for example, if we're going to make introductions between them and other people, to send off some emails and like set reminders for checking in later on down the line. And so often just like doing quite a few of those in a day. I like to do weeks where I do a lot of calls where I like pack in like 5 a day, 4 days a week. Alex does not like to do that quite as much. So I do like intense weeks and then weeks where I have like some, like don't do any calls at all. And I think like Alex is more like stone steady.
Yeah, I think I do, my typical week is like 4 days of 3 calls a day, and then procrastinating on all the follow-up until Friday, and then sending like 5 hours of emails. I guess like maybe one thing that might not be obvious but has been like really fun for me on joining is like if we're going to speak to people and it seems really obvious that they should go in some cool pathway and we want to introduce them to someone in the area, that means we need to like know who's in the areas and like know who they're excited to chat to. So I get to reach out to people working on bio at FHI or like hiring people for Anthropic and say like, what are you doing? Can you tell me about it? And like, who do you want to speak to? And like, this is, I think, useful, but also just really fun for someone who's like interested in lots of the big ideas in the space. So that's like, I guess, something that I've been doing a lot over the last few months is like, as well as actually talking to people and being useful to them, like asking people who needs to work on your problem area, like what are you looking for? And then hopefully like finding some people like that and putting them in touch.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and then I do some other projects as well alongside. So all of us on the advising team, on the one-on-one team, mostly our jobs are like mostly about doing the calls, but I do also some other projects. So I do a little bit of headhunting for when organizations reach out that they're hiring for a role that is like seems like particularly valuable. I might like send them a list of folks who seem like likely candidates. And I've also been doing some work on trying to encourage more people to apply for advising in the first place. So it's quite fun to do to mix up the year by doing a mix of different things.
Great, and I guess what are the most common questions you get asked in your role as advisors? I'm guessing some themes emerge.
What a meta question to start off the Q&A with. Cheeky. Yeah. Yeah, anything come to mind, Alex? Do you want to jump in?
I think, yeah, maybe a couple of things or something like, I kind of want to answer a slightly different question, which is like,
what a cheeky answer.
Yeah.
What are the ways in which we're useful to people on calls? Which like, maybe they have this exact question. Often they don't have this exact question, but they should. So we say, you should be asking about this. So like, we talk to some people about like how to choose a course area. So like some calls we talk about philosophy a bit and kind of like, how should I actually be thinking about like what it means to do the most good? Sometimes people have like a pretty concrete plan and we like try to red team it a bit, can be kind of useful. Often...
For those who aren't in the know, red teaming is?
Oh, pointing out the ways in which the plan might be bad. And like, maybe we're right about this, and then they pick a different plan. But often, like, if you have some plan, thinking about how it could go wrong, and then like, knowing how to prevent that from happening seems like to increase the probability of success of the plan. And then often it will be like, I want to go into this area, and we like broadly agree that they should, and they're like, so what should I, like, how do I do that? And I think like, one of the most valuable things we can do is like, help people come up with like, a series of tests if they're trying to work out which area to go into, or like a series of like actions to take to actually progress in a particular direction if they have worked that out.
Great.
Yep. So we talk to people at all different kinds of stages, different ages, different stages of their career, different levels of certainty about which area they want to go into, different levels of involvement and engagement with like effective altruism as a community or as a movement. And so there's a fair amount of variety of the kinds of things that we might talk about. I think the first thing that Alex talked about picking a problem area is like a really thorny question. There's, I think I fully empathize with the problem of sort of, if you're sort of 80,000 hours, like very strongly emphasizes, pick a problem. The problem is really important. The problems vary like hundreds of times, like some are much more important than others. And that's quite a daunting thing to try and get a handle on by yourself. And hopefully having someone to chat to about that can be pretty helpful. So you've like, can write down some of your initial thoughts in the document that we used before the call, and then just being able to like chat to someone who's kind of sensible and shares your values and can help you like think through some of your uncertainties and work out how to, like, what might be good to read next or who you might want to talk to next to try and make the progress can be really useful. So I think this, like, yeah, to answer your original question, like the thing that we get asked a lot, I think, or the thing that we like end up having conversations a lot about is around this kind of problem choice type stuff. Like perhaps more so than you might expect. If you're thinking this is like careers advice, maybe it's like all about specifically, you should apply for this job and here's how to do well in interviews. We basically don't do that. We don't talk about like, I'd basically say nothing about like interview technique and like how to improve your CV. It's much more like big picture, career strategy, planning, trying to help connect people up with other people who can help them with their career, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that reminded me that like, it's probably worth saying, there's like one sort of class of question that I think we get, like the class of question that we get asked with that we are not helpful with the most often is like, someone just like wants a job and they're like, can you get me a job? Or like, can you tell me about the secret list of jobs that like, and we have a list of jobs, it's not secret, it's our job board. Like, look at those, you can just totally apply for them. And I think like, these calls can be quite difficult sometimes because I like do this job because I care about helping people. And sometimes someone's just like, has applied for a bunch of jobs and like hasn't, you know, job markets are tough sometimes. But like, that isn't really, it's a careers advice service, but we're not able to just say like, oh yeah, I'm friends with this hiring manager, they'll just hire you. Or like, there's this secret list of jobs that are really impactful and like, are really easy to get that for some reason we're not publicizing. Go and do one of those. And I think like, that's probably the question that like, is most often asked that we aren't very useful with.
Or like specific versions of that where it's like, yeah, do you know the like specific best roles in like this particular area in this particular region? And the answer is no, I don't know those roles.
Yeah, a really great audience question that links into this is, how much career planning do you recommend people do before they apply for one-on-one advising?
Yeah, this is a question I've been thinking about a bunch because I think this puts a lot of people off applying because on the page, maybe we talk a bunch about like talking through your career plan, which I think gives people the impression that you have to have like already worked out your career plan. And then we'll just be like, that bit's good, that bit's not so good. Maybe change this, correct your spelling, which is not what we do. I think that it is useful to have some sense of what you're aiming for and some sense of what you're wanting to do next so that we can talk about something useful. But you don't need to have done a ton of like deep thinking yourself. Like for example, 80,000 Hours has this 8-week career planning course. You're more than welcome to do that and then apply for advising to talk to someone afterwards if you like. It's just absolutely not a requirement. You don't have to have locked yourself in a room for 8 weeks having done all of the thinking first before applying. I think I would recommend that people have done enough to be able to write a paragraph on like where you might be wanting to aim in your career. and a paragraph on like what kinds of things are you thinking about for like the next few months or the next year as like next steps. And that's just basically what we ask for on the application form. So if you can write that, that seems like whatever you've done to get to that position is enough. That's something that's my take on how much career planning is useful. Yeah, what does that actually look like? It probably looks like spending the weekend at EAGX and like talking to a bunch of people about different career paths and like spending a little bit of time thinking and just like writing it down in a Google Doc.
I think I basically agree, and I think it might be useful to try to sketch out some ways in which people could make a mistake in the amount of career planning they do before the call, as a way of like working out whether you're doing about the right amount. So I think like the most serious mistake would be like thinking that you need to do an amount of career planning that you will not in fact do, and therefore not ever applying because you don't think you've done enough. And I think this is just like seeing some people laughing.
Yeah.
If this is you, you've already done too much career planning. You should apply like right now, even if you have to leave the talk to concentrate on the application.
Yeah.
I think another mistake would be something like actually just having spent so much time planning your career and resolving all of the uncertainties that like a generalist who talks to lots of people about lots of different paths has literally nothing left to add because like you've spent 200 hours on this. And then maybe the last one, which points in the other direction, is like if you could have worked out a thing yourself by thinking about it for 5 minutes, probably it's useful for you to have done that first, because then we can help you with like the next step. So I guess like if you start planning and you get stuck, then like letting us help you get unstuck with like whatever step that is in the process seems good.
Yeah, I think like over the course of career planning, there'll be a time where help is most useful. And like it's possible for some people, the time where help is most useful is like a bit earlier than you might be like thinking, because getting a bit of assistance to help you work out your uncertainties gives you that like a little bit of a turbo boost. Like actually maybe there's a thing that if you were just struggling with thinking about it yourself, it would take you much longer. If you just chatted to someone, you would like just get a lot more clarity a lot quicker.
Great, so taking a bit of a sidestep in terms of like making the most of this conference, you guys might have insight on this of what are common mistakes you think undergrads make or people make when networking, so I guess like at this conference or kind of more broadly, in case you have views.
Yeah, interesting question. Some thoughts? This feels like more like Alex's area than me.
I was going to say it feels more like you. I guess the undergrads bit feels more like me, and the networking bit maybe feels more like you.
Okay, well, I'm glad we're both here.
I think that I have some general heuristic, which is like exploration is more valuable the earlier you are in your career because you like have longer to get the payoff. So I guess I guess that like talking to people with like very different worldviews to you who feel like able to challenge you on your thinking in a way that's like healthy and feels like safe for both of you, but like conditional on that, talking to people who like disagree with you and push you to think in different directions seems like it would be very easy to like not seek that out because it can be like taxing. And so yeah, it seems like pushing in that direction is like often going to be valuable.
Yeah, I think sometimes people can be a bit like underconfident with how much they can reach out and ask for help. I think like it's kind of possible for people to be a bit overconfident, a bit pushy, but that's like actually just extremely unlikely for people to go in that direction, I think. Much more likely that people are a bit likely to ask for help and reach out to people who would be very happy to help. I think this can be trickier like when other people have day jobs and they're busy and it's hard for you to try and get half an hour of their time. Conferences like this are therefore ideal because like people are here and are very like they're here to help and they're very willing to talk to people who are early on in their career and like mentor them and try and provide some advice. So I think if you're in the position of being an undergrad, giving yourself a little nudge to reach out to people to try and get the most of being able to grab them at a conference like this to ask for some of their advice. I guess like one of the things that goes with that though is like coming prepared, like having like done the thing where you can answer your questions if it takes 5 minutes, like having like Googled some of the stuff like at the organization that they work or something, and like coming with like a list of like specific questions that you want to ask so that you can actually get the most out of the half-hour slot is just really, really useful. So specifically, in terms of the questions that you want to ask people, it's quite useful to, if you can, have this mindset of like knowing what your uncertainties are. What are the biggest kind of cruxes that would like change your mind on whether to go in this direction or another direction, and try and have a plan a bit in mind about how you can answer those uncertainties as quickly as possible. So if you're like weighing up like academia versus going into industry, like what's the biggest thing that would change your mind on this? Is it to do with like the workload? Is it to do with the supportiveness of the culture? Like that kind of thing. And being able to try and gather a bunch of information and then put it all together at the end to try and like make your picture. So yeah, doing a bit of like treating it like a data gathering exercise where you have like a goal seems pretty useful.
Yeah, I think there's a really good question you can ask when speaking to older people, like people in a job that you're considering going into, and it's actually like the first question Sim asked us, but you can be like very specific about how you're asking it, and I think we did actually answer it in that way, which is like, what does your day-to-day look like? And if people don't give a specific answer to that, you can say like, what did you do this week? And I think like testing personal fit is important and difficult, and a really good way of doing it is like asking someone actually doing the thing, like what they spend their time on actually, and then having a think about like whether you would enjoy like that life. And I think that can be one of the most valuable things you get out of speaking to people who are like in a career you're considering.
Another question on advising, I guess there's like two questions from the audience here. One is, how does it work? So you book a call with an advisor. Internally, do you decide like who's the best fit for that advisor, or can you book a specific person? And then, what are the outcomes that someone can expect? Is it mostly that you have like a really rich discussion during your call and you help them clarify some things, or is it that you often like, give them some homework? Or what are the outcomes that come from calls?
Cool. Yeah, so people fill in so I'll just walk you through the process. So people fill in an application on the website, which asks for some of your thoughts on your longer term career plans, your like next steps, asks for bits of like your involvement in EA, like a few questions like that. We do a reviewing process internally to try and make sure that we're like most efficiently trying to help the people who are best placed to help. And so we do that on an ongoing basis. There's no like specific cutoff or deadline now. This has changed compared to how it used to be. So we like weekly, Matt, who's not here on the team, is like in charge of like the powerhouse of reviewing all the applications that we get. And then we do like a sort of sense check when we need a second opinion. For the people that we think that we're in a good position to help and want to speak to, we will like invite them to fill in like a bit more detail on a Google Doc, which has some of the questions that people have already filled in, plus some like extra things that we want a bit of detail in, and invite them to book in. They can pick whichever of us they want to speak to as like based on availability. So like particularly, I did a consulting background. I've worked in operations, and so like might be a particularly good person for someone to pick if they want to speak to someone with that background. But they like want to talk to like a woman or a person of color or something. Alex, teacher, forecasting, Matt, lawyer, like everyone has like a slightly different angle. I think we're all pretty good at talking to anyone, but like if people have a preference, you absolutely can pick. So then we do the video call, and yeah, Alex, you want to talk about what you do on a typical call?
Yeah. So like you'll speak to us, we will like talk through with like different weightings depending on what's most useful, like how you're thinking about causes at like an overall level, how you're thinking about like long-term plans, and then something about like what you should do in the immediate future, which might be like weeks or months, or it might be like in the next couple of years. And then after the call, we like things that could come out of it are like potentially if you're like really excited about one area and you want to know what the next things are, we might just like give you a bunch of stuff to read, and or give you some like people to talk to let you find out more. I think one thing that might surprise some people is like we typically only speak to people once, and this is basically because we find that second calls in general are like not that useful. Like we're not that able to help people because like we're kind of like very good at being the first point of contact and then like inviting people to talk to people in the area they're going into. The big exception to that is like if someone's circumstances have changed quite a lot. Like I spoke to someone recently who I think had spoken to my colleague Michelle like 3-ish years ago and had like decided to start a PhD. and now he was coming to the end of his PhD and like was thinking about different things to do afterwards. And I thought that call was actually like one of the most valuable calls I've had, because there was like lots of shared context already, and like there was a very clear new decision. Whereas I expect like if I spoke to that person again in a month, I would have like very little I would be able to help with.
Yeah, similarly, I talked to one of Jenna's advisees, Jenna, also a member of the team, a bit later on, Neil Nanda. So like when he was like facing a specific kind of choice about what to be doing, can be like helpful to like talk through like specific career choices with people as like a later on call. Yep, and so then I guess I wanted to add that for the people that we don't speak to ourselves, we really try and provide additional resources. So like basically everyone gets offered a free book, if you haven't had one already, a copy of The Precipice. And also we sometimes often try to connect people up with someone else who might be able to help them better. So someone who could do like a one-on-one call with them, whether that's someone like a community organizer or maybe someone who has like a bit more expertise in their particular area, like animal welfare, than us. As well. So yeah, we do try and help. Last year we spoke to like 50% of people who applied. I think it's a little lower this year. I'm not sure what the figure is right now.
That's still pretty good odds.
I think so. Although I think it's quite hard for people. I'm not sure how reassuring that is for people. Like I'm not sure that the percentage actually like helps. I think if the thing that maybe helps a bit more is the like, hopefully the process of applying is actually just useful in and of itself. Like you're just having to do a little bit of like sitting down and writing some stuff, and like whatever the outcome is, hopefully that process was like kind of useful. And yeah, if you do get a call, then like we are very friendly.
So we hear about career capital a lot when we're thinking about careers and what you guys have written about. What are some of the misconceptions, common misconceptions that you encounter around career capital? What are tips here that you think people should know?
Can I take this one?
Sure.
Yeah.
There's a bit of a bugbear I have here, in that like, I notice patterns of mistakes in people I speak to, and there's one that's related to this, which is like, people learn about this really important concept of option value, where like, it can be useful to like, have the ability to make a decision later. And often I find myself saying something like, option value is not useful if you're never planning to spend it. And so like, if you already know where you want to end up, if you already like have a good idea for what your long-term plan should be, then like building flexible career capital, which like is generally helpful for applying for lots of jobs, is probably a mistake if you also have the option of like building experience directly in the thing you want to go into. So that's one, I have a second. The other thing is, having said that, like, generally built career capital can often be a mistake, I also find people often undervalue, like, the fact that your career is really long, and, like, hopefully you're planning to do good for, like, all of it. And so, like, it's really just totally reasonable to do something for a few years, which you, like, don't think is gonna earn you very much money, don't think is gonna actually do that much good for the world in like its own terms, like what during those few months or years, but will like put you in a really good position to like then do loads of good later. And I think the thing that seems really funny to me is everyone seems to accept that like going to university is like gonna give you negative salary, you have to pay to do it, and like is probably not gonna like some of you, maybe, but like I certainly didn't produce any like research that was useful for the world during the 4 years I spent at university. But I think it was like a great decision because it then gave me a bunch of options later on. And like this is also true of like early jobs. It's also true of like being a research assistant for a year if you're interested in going into academia. It's also true of like taking a job as a software engineer somewhere that isn't a social impact firm if you're really sure you then want to do engineering later on somewhere that is going to be really exciting, and that's the way you think is fastest to build skills. So I think like does seem really great, but being specific about it is often a good idea.
Yeah, I think I completely agree with both those points. So specifically, like I did consulting for a bunch of years before I switched into doing more direct work. Like Alex was a teacher for a bunch of years. Like Sim also like built your career capital in the real world. Yeah, I think it's just, I'm glad that I didn't like stress a bunch about like feeling like I needed to like urgently like straight out of university like have to be doing the thing working at like an EAGorg, otherwise I wasn't doing something useful. I'm like really glad that just wasn't a thing. And like hopefully being useful now. Yeah, I also completely agree with Alex's first point. I think there has, over time, been a bit more of a switch in some of 80,000 Hours advice away from the like flexible career capital, just kind of do consulting type thing, towards more targeted career capital for the specific path that you want to go into. And the reason why there has been that is I think that there has just been a bit more like crystallization in the kind of community and in 80K's advice around some of the different cause areas that seem like they're like particularly important. Some of the different career paths that seem like they're going to work on those problems are quite specific, and there are like particular ways to get into that. So instead of just being like, maybe we just need people to be just like generally useful, now we're a bit like, oh no, we need people to just like go work in government. Like, go do that then. No need to like kick the can down the road and like keep your options open for like maybe doing government or maybe becoming a researcher or something.
Yeah, I mean, just as somebody who is currently doing a lot of hiring, I completely agree with this advice. So, you know, for example, if you're interested in ops or if you're interested in events, we're hiring events people at the minute. I would love someone to be really mission aligned, but having done, 1 to 5 to 10 years of work, running amazing events at some, I don't know, Somerset House or some other organization that's totally like, arguably doesn't have that much impact, but they're really well placed then to come into an EA org and really hit the ground running. And I think we really, in some areas, we don't really have that yet. So a strong +1. So another audience question. So how do you think about advising people on sort of starting their own projects and organizations versus joining existing companies and nonprofits?
I think you're the be more ambitious person.
So yeah, I think there's a lot of appetite at the moment for, and enthusiasm for sort of new ideas and new projects being sort of started up, particularly these really huge ones, the mega projects that can absorb, that can be bigger than like 80,000 hours, that can like absorb hundreds of millions of dollars a year. I think it's great that as a community we are feeling that ambitious right now, because yeah, we absolutely should. If we really want to change the world, we really can, and we really should raise our ambitions. I think that this is the kind of thing that it's hard to do, which is why it hasn't been, why there's a gap here, why like lots of people haven't done it. I think it requires both like expertise in particular areas to make, and like be really connected in with like the subject matter experts in that particular area, so that you make sure you're doing something that's going to be like, it's going to be good, and it's like connected up with the right people, it's going to land well. Plus also you want to have like a bunch of experience under your belt, that sort of like a few years of like, having made things happen, and like, having like good like people management experience or budget management experience or something like that to be able to make a project work. So I think it seems like starting up some of these like major new huge projects could be like an extremely valuable thing for people to do. I think it's getting yourself in a position where you're going to be able to do that later down the line seems like a great kind of like path to go down. I think there can be opportunities for people to get involved in some of these things earlier on in their career if you happen to keep your eye out for there being like kind of junior roles, even just for kind of people relatively straight out of, relatively early on in their career, able to kind of like hit the ground running and help, whether that's like a PA role for someone who's starting up a new foundation or something, or like an ops generalist who's happy to like do whatever needs doing to like set up the office and like make things work. So there are like some roles there, sort of supporting roles. I think the founder roles are really valuable to aim towards, and take a bunch of like prep to get in the right position. We actually just recently changed our priority path list, the sort of the list of careers that we think are like possibly the most valuable, and being a founder of projects that like work on important pressing problems is now, like we have a whole new career review that is specifically focused on that as a path. So yeah, increased interest in that for sure.
I think maybe there's one action that seems worth taking if possible, if this seems really exciting to you, that I would love us to be able to help with, but seems like we can't, like we may be fairly well positioned to, but like it's just a very hard thing, which is like, I think often if you're really excited about a project, you like want a co-founder who complements you, and this might be the most important thing for you to find. And there's like various pairings you can imagine that would work really well. Maybe you're incredible at generating ideas and you're just so excited and you can really make stuff happen. Like genuinely, you're just like, you've already founded like 3 things, and none of them were like that sensible, but like they all like actually did happen because you can make stuff happen. And maybe you need someone like my colleague Michelle, who can just like call you out on some of your ideas being bad and say like, hey, this, you generated 5 ideas, like this one, do that. Like the other 4, like drop them. Or maybe like you're really sensible and really smart and you've just got this incredible idea for something that really is going to change the world, and you also have like kind of terrible executive function and just like aren't ever going to get anything done unless you have someone who can just like make you actually do the things you've worked out are a good idea. So like there's different pairings, but I think like finding someone who has a different skill set to you, who you can work really well with, seems not necessarily like necessary for success, but like gonna massively increase your chances of it.
Yep, I feel like that. I feel like I'm like one of a pair. So we've got our CEO and I came in a year later, so not quite co-founders, but I think we very much have this dynamic, and I think it's really special when it works, and I think it just multiplies what you're able to achieve. So I think another thing that I find really exciting when looking at CVs when we're hiring is that people might be doing a job, but on the side they've founded some kind of like EA project, and I think this also gives you the like a kind of flavor of this, of starting your own thing and trying to make things happen in the real world.
Yeah, so I guess like a lot of the organizations like ATK and like CEA and stuff, and Giving What We Can, were like set up and run by people when they were still studying or doing their PhDs or things. Yeah, like specifically while you're studying is a great time to be experimenting with starting these kinds of things up. There's also just like so many cool things that are happening with community builders these days, like things like the Global Challenges Project kind of spinning up as like supporting university groups worldwide. And there's like so many cool people currently doing the undergrads who've like taken breaks to go and help out organizations like Forethought or with sort of marketing or things like that, where people have been able to get stuck in with something that's like quite entrepreneurial quite early on.
I think there's something important to say about this like having a project in your spare time thing though, which is actually directly relevant to like the situation we're now in, where like people can be ambitious and people can get funded for ideas if the ideas are actually good, which is like, don't start something in your spare time and then like be in this situation where like, once it succeeds, then I'll work on it full time. And it's like kind of going and happening, but like, you're not sure if it's good. Like, I can see this failure where like, you're not putting enough hours into the thing for it to like actually succeed or actually fail. And you're like competent enough at it that like, it doesn't fail with only 2 hours a week. Like, if it's doing something with 2 hours a week, like, and you can get funded for it, maybe you should actually then, like, maybe that's the sign that says, okay, now I actually want to put all my time into this. And so I think like, maybe that's a way in which like, we're in a really privileged situation now where like, for people who can start things and those things are actually exciting and those things are actually going to do good in the world, like you can just get the seed funding to like actually start it and quit the other thing you're doing and go for it full time. And I think that seems like a really exciting place to be.
A question we got earlier on. So what would you consider as effective tools for validating the choice of social or environmental problem that you're looking to work on? So like, what's the best way to get your expertise from technical or networking perspective to make inroads into an area?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we were looking at this question and wondering how to interpret it. So I understand that question to mean there's this question of how do you pick a problem to work on, a problem area to work on. And then maybe there's this like extra level question, which is like, how do you even know that that process that you went through to pick a problem is something that you believe in and you think is like a reliable process? So I feel like if we just find the question like that, then I think we have a bunch of tools on the first part of that question. They're like, how do you actually pick a problem area? So there's like a bunch of guidance that we have in the 8-week career planning course about like, how do you get stuck into thinking about what problems are more important? And I think that ultimately this is like, it decomposes into like a bit about moral thinking, a bit about ethics and what you value, and a bit about like empirical stuff and looking at like the world as it is and which problems seem like really important there. That seems like that's a logical like breakdown of the problem there. And so there's these two different things that you want to think about. And then you might want to just do this combination of doing independent research and like thinking about these questions yourself, and maybe starting off by looking at things like the ATK problem profiles or EAG talks on different like course areas, things like that, and then doing some of your own independent thinking of like trying to work out your answer to some of these like crucial questions, choice points that would take you in different directions. And at some point you might want to either get as far as having your own independent view on what things are most important, or you might be wanting to defer to some other people, some like thinkers that you respect, or to the community of like people that you think are onto something. Or you might want to do a little bit of a hybrid of the two. So this is like maybe what you might want to do on the object level. Yeah.
Yeah. I think maybe I should try and answer what we thought was the second part of the question, which was like, how do you know that this process has like succeeded? And I think the phrasing of the question had this word, like, how do you validate the process you did? And I think like you like try to falsify it. And if you fail to falsify it, then like this is some evidence that like the process has gone well. And so like what I mean by this is like, so if you've come out with some like view, I think it's like actually important, and you might be able to tell I used to be a science teacher, it's like to like form a hypothesis that's like, so with this worldview, like what should I do, and how is what I'm going to do then going to actually like affect the things I care about? And then like see if you can like break that story down. And if you can't break that story down, find someone you respect who's willing to disagree with you and see if they can break the story down. And like if you really try to poke holes in this story that you've told and like can't, that, I would say, is as close as you can get to like validating the process you went through. And if you find holes, then like see if you can patch them or see if you need to change your plan. But I think like that's how you like test whether this view you've arrived at is like a sensible one.
I do think that the process of poking holes in your worldview and trying to improve it is a lifelong process, though. I don't think I've got a settled worldview that I expect to have exactly the same in like 15 years' time, let alone in 2 years' time. And I think that's okay. I think that it is tricky because these are like big choices about what do you want to do, what do you want to spend a bunch of your life doing, and like maybe you're moving a bunch of money, and like, you know, what do we actually want to fund? And I think there's like a bit of a explore, exploit kind of trade-off point here, where at some point, like there might also be some like unknown unknowns or like some crucial considerations that you haven't quite uncovered yet. And at some point, I think you just do have to cut your losses and be like, I have like sufficient level of confidence that I think my, like at least the most sensible objections that I've come across so far, I think I feel like settled that that I'm like fine with those. But you're never gonna have completely got rid of some potential nagging doubts that we might be like drastically wrong about things.
Yeah, I think it seems sensible to do the process of try and form some worldview, like form a plan based on that worldview, and then like try to poke holes in the specific plan rather than, it's possible to spend like decades poking holes in like your current understanding of moral philosophy.
People in this very building do that every day.
If that sounds really fun, like, you can totally do that as a job, and it seems kind of valuable. And you should see if GPI is hiring for any RAs at the moment.
So for people who are in like university groups and local groups who end up being in the position where they end up feeling like they're giving career advice or they're guiding new EAs, what advice would you give them? Because they obviously wouldn't have your experience, but yeah, how could they be the most useful, and how can they avoid harm?
Yeah, I think I've heard from some community organizers that it's kind of surprising how quickly they are in a position where they're sort of talking to other people and like in an advice giving position and like feel quite worried and underconfident about not having like a lot of experience under the belt. I think that's a very fair feeling, and I think you shouldn't try and pretend to know things that you don't know. I think you just feel like you have permission to answer questions by saying, I don't really know the answer to that question. I feel like I have permission saying that on an advising call, and I work for 80,000 hours, so you absolutely have permission to say that if you're talking to someone about their career and you just don't really know what the right answer is. And that's like totally fine, as long as you can feel like maybe you just like work with the person to try and like see if you can help them work out how they might find the answer to their question, even if you don't yourself know the answer. So maybe you can do things like, like brainstorm, like who else could they ask, or where might they be able to find the answer to this question somewhere else. But so perhaps helpfully, having some understanding of the network of resources that there are out there is probably a pretty helpful thing. Like, perhaps more so than having like lots of object level understanding of like what it's like to work in Washington, DC, or what it's like to do an economics PhD when you won't have done those things yourself. But if you can kind of know where in the wider community there are resources for people who want to do those kinds of things, you can point people in the right direction. So maybe that's one overarching thing that I would say is like, feel free to say when you don't know, and also, but like, see if you can know about what resources there are to help people. Yeah, and then like, there's some other things around, I guess like connecting with people where they're at, which I think is a thing that's like really valuable when people are like at the early stages of career planning. Like, they know more about themselves than you do about them, so try not to overreach and sort of think that you know what's best for them, and sort of like ask them like, questions to sort of probe their thinking, and like, yeah, try and like recognize the bits of what they're saying that seem really like valuable, and things that you want to like encourage, and like see if you can like gently nudge them in directions where you think that they're like, they haven't quite got a sensible plan yet or something. Yeah, Alex?
I think maybe I just want to like be encouraging about how useful you can be even if you don't have any object level advice, which is like, some decent fraction of the value I add is like asking people obvious questions that I feel like if the roles were reversed, they would have asked me in the same situation. And this can be as simple as like, seems like you need to work out the answers. Have you tried setting a timer and thinking about it for 5 minutes? And I think just like, asking people questions that they know that they should answer, but then they're like, in a conversation with someone they feel comfortable with. So they're like answering to you rather than like sitting on their own trying to come up with like the answer. Like, let people do their thinking out loud to you. And I think this can be like a really like valuable use of both of your time. And also like, if they're thinking really hard about their career, you can totally just tell them to apply for advising with us.
Yeah, and there are a bunch of like resources, I think, for supporting people doing careers advice stuff. So Global Challenges Project has a bunch of resources. I think I'd just recommend probably reading the 8,000 Hours a Week Career Planning course is probably the thing that has like most in one place, the like career planning tools. And there's also the Key Ideas series, which has more of the like big picture stuff. So I think if you have like one set of resources that you've like read through, that seems pretty useful.
Are there any of the podcast episodes that you think are particularly useful here, or are they they're more like deep dives on specific topics?
Well, 80K, we have this 80K After Hours podcast that has an Alex podcast on it and a Habiba podcast on it. No. What are the most useful podcast episodes? I really like the first one that we did with Toby Ord talking about long-termism, where he just like talks through the arguments in favor of like caring about and prioritizing the welfare of future generations. That was actually really important for me specifically when I was first like thinking through those issues. So that's like on the cause prioritization side of things. Sorry, was the original question like which podcasts are good for career planning stuff or for the student organizers?
I think broadly speaking, for when thinking about careers, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you are interested in an area or maybe a couple of areas and your career planning has got to the stage of like, I want to solve this problem or like help solve this problem, finding out a ton about that problem is going to be really useful. And for people who enjoy podcasts, like it's very easy to consume loads of information about that problem by listening to loads of podcasts on that problem area. And so like this, there's not a specific podcast that I'd recommend in general for career planning, but like trying to find out about a thing that you might want to work in. Like the feed is great for that.
Yeah, I think the ones that are specifically more on career planning are the ones that are with the various members of the 80,000 Hours team. So there's one with Ben Todd that talks through the key ideas. There's one with Michelle Hutchinson, our boss, like originally talking about advising, and then a more recent one that Michelle and I did, again, talking about advising. And those ones have more general discussion about career planning in them, whereas almost all the other podcasts will be like specifically on particular cause areas.
Oh, I think our 100th episode is, for people who read the title and think it might be worth it, the most valuable thing we've ever produced.
Do you want to say which one that one is?
So 100th episode, check it out, guys. So we've got time for one final question, and I think I know what the answer is, but enough talk. What action should people take?
I mean, there's like a service that they could apply to. Yeah, no, specific actions. I think like here and now, I think if you haven't got like, I mean, I know it's Sunday afternoon and so people are like maybe flagging a bit at EAGX. If so, that's totally fine. You can just take a break. But if you are with a renewed passion to trying to get some like concrete actions out of EAGX, then I think I would recommend like doing one more like look through swap card and like looking for someone who might answer like a specific uncertainty you have about a career planning thing. So specifically for this. But yeah, I think if you are at the stage where you're thinking more about career planning things, if you haven't tried to write down some of your thoughts on like potential paths that you might be aiming for in some of your next steps, I think like writing those things down is really valuable. And you can write them down in our application form and then also just hit submit and then apply for 8,000 hours careers advising if you like.
Also, I didn't book anything for the next hour in case people had specific questions that they didn't want to ask in a public forum. So I'm just going to kind of hang around out there. Don't feel obliged, but like if you want to take on something, I can't promise I'll be sensible. I'm totally fried.
Yeah.
But like, I'll say some stuff.
Yeah, and that's great because I know there were some more kind of specific questions about specific career paths that we didn't get time to touch on. So maybe those people might want to come and find you. But wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. And it was great to hear from you guys. Thanks.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.